Hey, it's me, Francis, and I am going to make the next song for the project today. So, welcome to another episode of How to Start a Dungeon Synth Project. Let's dive right in and think about what's next for a project when you already have a song that's finished, which is the situation I'm in right now. So, here's my session more or less where I left it off. I reset a few things for the new video, and I muted my print track. Normally I would make each song in a different project file, but in this case I want to keep my settings as consistent as possible so the videos sound relatively similar. I'm going to continue using the Mellotron and the other synths as the sound sources and stay away from MIDI for this whole series. But I'm going to choose different patches and presets. I think that I said it in one of the previous episodes that I'd try using a vibraphone sound. So I think that's where we're going to start today. I also want to consider leaving myself open to the possibility of not writing a complete song in today's episode. Sometimes I think it can be valuable to write a few songs at the same time, and getting started on a few ideas will help me streamline the process of creating a whole EP or album. So let's jump over to my Plex track, since I'm going to be using a similar type of a sound. A vibraphone isn't plucked, but it serves a similar purpose in a mix. So this is the patch I've got. It's a vibraphone running through one of my reverb pedals. Or in this case, through both of them, because in Dungeon Synth, 90% of your sound is the reverb, right? The difference between that and this, just like one of them's glorious, right? The other one's a little bit dry, I guess is the official term. So I like that sound, and we are going to run with it. The first thing I'm going to do here is to think about what tempo I'm at. And to do that, I will insert a click source. That way it comes through in the video. And this is the same tempo as the previous song, so I think I want to choose a different tempo for this one. And to do that, I'm going to make a marker, and in Reaper, Shift-C lets you place a new time signature or tempo. This one's going to be a bit slower, so I'll choose 135, and I'm just sort of guessing there. In this situation, I am playing to a click track in order to speed up the process of editing so that the video is going to be a reasonable length. Otherwise, I'd end up with stuff that's like 2 hours long. If you want to see that, come to one of my live streams. I generally live stream on Tuesday nights and randomly throughout the week on other days if I have time. So, welcome to Improvised Take. I liked that thing that I played. It was a G minor chord. Then I moved the third and the fifth scale degree down chromatically. I think that sounds neat, so I'm going to see if I can come up with something that uses that. So I think that all sounded pretty good. That was improvised, and at the end I made a little flub there, and I think that I had enough content to come back and make a loop out of the chunk that I enjoyed. And I think I had two pretty solid parts there. Let's take a look at how I would edit audio here to make this into a functional looping segment. Because when you are recording through a reverb pedal, it's really hard to create a convincing loop because the reverb trail will just slice itself off. Generally, it's preferable to add the reverb later. But in this case, I wanted to give it more of a live feeling. So I'm running straight through the reverb pedal. Okay, so here's what that waveform looks like. Nice, healthy waveform. I played pretty consistently in time, so I think that that isn't going to be much of an issue. And the only problem I see is that I didn't mean to play that note, and it caught me off guard. It sort of startled me. And I think that's going to be the end of the take here. But the other stuff was good enough that I intend to keep it. So let's just think about the waveform and think about what is and is not good enough to keep. In this case, you can see that the waveform is a little bit early. It means I played the first note a little before the beat. And it's easy to get caught up in these types of edits and say like, oh, this should be perfect. In this situation, it doesn't need to be. I think it's going to sound fine. And it might not even be noticeable that it's a bit early, especially if it's the first note of the song, because the song starts wherever it starts. I do, however, want to make some markers to reference for myself where things happen. I want to have the song start on a beat, and I'm going to make a marker here for the A section. This is the first true loop, I think, counting measures here. Okay, that's going to be A again. And I think that after that happens again, yep, this is our B section. And I think that that whole section here lasts. Cool. Okay, and then that little piece here is early, and when something like this is early, it can become a problem because it's stacked on top of something that I'm intending to use in a loop. So let's take a look at how I would adjust this to make it functional without re-recording it, because re-recording it is usually the preferable option, but in this case I want to show you what you would do if you really thought you had a magical take and didn't want to go back and fix stuff. And maybe this isn't magical, but I thought it sounded cool, and it would be a shame to throw away everything I just recorded. So marker goes here. This is going to come back to the A section. So I'm going to make a little slice and duplicate that. And if you're a Reaper user, that's Control D to duplicate, and an S key will slice the highlighted item at the playhead position. And that was Control Z to go back on that. So let's have a look at this slice right here and listen to it. So a few problems. I hear that next note that was a mistake for a moment before going back to the beginning, and the reverb trail from the previous part gets cut off. You can hear that reverb trail disappear. It's almost like slicing your item. So we need to fix two things, and both of them can be solved with the same technique. I'm playing an F chord after a G, and that happens somewhere else in the song. So what I can do here is to find a place, generally on our grid if possible. And I'm going to sort of perform corrective surgery here. I'm making a slice before and after the item that covers the overlap between the two items. So that much is more than enough. And what I'll do is I'm going to use that to find a looping point. And in this case, I am copying it. You can use Control C and Control V, but in Reaper or many other DAWs, pretty much every other one has a function like this. I'm going to hold Control and click and drag, which is going to copy it. And I'm going to place it for now on a different track, just for my own reference. If you're a Mac user, that would be Command. Click and drag. And I'm going to make space for this between the two items. And just fill in that blank space with this overlapping fragment, which should have reverb trails because the same pedal settings and the same keyboard settings existed before and after the take. So let's just hear this and see if these cut points are better. Generally speaking, I would use as little of this as possible since it's repeated material from earlier, but you use as much as you need to. No need to be ashamed of using an enormous chunk for your audio surgery. And we can hear a little pop occur. And that's happening because the wave cycle is interrupted, and you can see it if you zoom in really far. This waveform isn't, there's definitely a gap there. And generally speaking, the correction for that is going to be some type of a crossfade. But in this situation, before I crossfade, I'm going to try to find, what we can do actually is we can use our actions menu and set item color to one random color. And what we can do here is, to make it obvious what's going on, adjust the color of the edit so you can hear and see the difference. And in this situation, we're just going to find another edit point and try to find a point that lines up a little bit better. You can do this visually. It's not always going to be super useful, but something like that looks like it's going to be much closer. Whoops. Okay. It's much better. Still not perfect, but better is always good. Same idea over here. I'm going to find a point that's a little bit cleaner. That looks a lot better than it was. Okay, and listening through the whole thing. Significant improvement. If we want to be really careful here, we can introduce a crossfade. Maybe a little bit more of one. Let's try a big crossfade. And that's almost impossible to hear. If there's even one more layer, you'll never notice that even happened. Same idea over here. That one's a little bit weird sounding. I'm going to try fading the other way. Okay, and that sounds pretty good. Okay, and at this point, that edit is clean. I'm not bothered by it in any way, and I think that it will work fine. So our next step here is to decide if we need this to loop more, because if we do, we can create a seamless loop by baking this edit in to our items. And to do that, we essentially, I like to do this with the glue function. There's other ways of doing it. In this situation, I will first try one thing. I'm going to try gluing all of it, Control-Shift-G, glue items within time selection. And I'm going to slice now on that A point and duplicate with Control-D. And I want to see if that works. Not quite. So I think that what I need to do is to backtrack and find a loop point that's a little bit more functional. I'm going to slice there because it's on a marker. And slice a little bit before. So 1, 2, 4. I think that's as much as I had. Oh no, less than that. I think I'm here. Is that the length? Twice that. Okay. So if I slice at that point, this is going to be functional as a loop, I think. So I'll delete this piece, duplicate that. And that works perfectly because it's the same take. This is actually, if we zoom in on it, exactly the same thing, and you don't even need to crossfade that. Okay, perfect. And then this one now can extend to its previous length. Cool. Perfect, perfect, perfect. And now this can all be prepared for a true loop because I can make this marker here. So now this whole item between these two markers is the loopable version of it. So if I glue all of this together and slice out this item, this is now going to be a perfectly loopable take. So if I listen to the transition here, that's going to be perfect. And this is the whole song. Fantastic. And that is audio editing, basically. That's just relatively unintrusive audio editing. You can do really advanced stuff that's going to, I guess, disrupt the integrity of the take, make your performance sound like someone else played it, make it, in a different key or at a different speed, fix every little note. And sometimes that's appropriate. In this case, I want it to sound more or less like I played it, just without the effort of practicing to the point where I have the completed song ready to perform, and it's a live performance. Because in this situation, I am not making a live album. If I'm making a live album, I hit record and go, and the mistakes stay in there. In this case, I'm trying to make it feel more like studio, and I'm trying to make it cleaner, I guess. So that, I think, will be good enough for the skeleton of the song, actually. I'm going to keep track of how often the parts change, I think. And mark my B sections, at least. Whoops. There's my A sections and my B sections. I don't need that marker at the beginning anymore. And I have one more B section over here. Okay. Fantastic. Cool. Okay, next we need to add another instrument. In this case, the song sort of works by itself with just that one repeating part, but I like to add a few layers to my tracks, and in this case, I'm imagining a flute or something like that. Maybe a choir would go well with this too. Some type of a pad sound or a melody sound. And I know myself well enough to know that I'll probably want to add bass as well, and perhaps some type of percussion. So let's experiment with pads first. And I'm going to try a flute type of a pad and a choir type of a pad. I'm going to put my pad on this strings track because it's already set up and ready to go, and this pad is serving the same purpose that the strings did in my previous track. If you're using a hardware recorder, or if you've ever used a hardware recorder, you know that you're usually limited by the number of tracks you have access to, whereas on a computer it's pretty easy to get in the habit of having even hundreds of tracks. And sometimes that can be a limitation in and of itself, because you feel like you should have everything carefully organized, and organizing things gets in the way of actually being creative or doing the work that you sat down to do. So I know that for myself, it helps me to limit myself in the amount of tracks that I have in a session. I'm going to experiment with delay. I like that small choir sound. So let's give that a shot and try recording it. See how it feels. I made a little mistake there, but that's okay. I think that what I'll do is punch that in and continue the recording where I left off. I'll show you where that punch in is going to happen. I'll solo the track. I think that we'll start right there on the beginning of the B section. I have a custom button here to toggle pre-roll, and the pre-roll normally exists in the metronome settings here. Pre-roll is going to start the playback before the recording starts by an amount of time that you set in the pre-roll measures field. So toggle pre-roll. And in the interest of time, we are going to loop this one too. So getting a little bit more practice audio editing. Our slice point normally would be here, but because the reverb is baked in, we need it to last a little bit longer. I'm going an extra measure beyond, making sure this slice point feels good. And that one feels great to me. If we're trying to be really careful, we can add a crossfade. It doesn't really need it, but it's not hurting it, so I'll leave it. I'm going to make a slice at the beginning of the first measure, even though it's probably a little bit early. Always a little bit early. That's my tendency. It's good to know yours. And this whole thing, instead of duplicating it, I'm going to copy it here. And you see how that makes a big crossfade between those two items. I can blend this crossfade back and determine an appropriate amount for it. And actually, that crossfade probably should happen after I've had time for the reverb tail to start manifesting itself on the first take. So let's hear this. Cool. That feels pretty good. Let's hear a little bit of it in context and make sure it's working. Feels pretty good. And we are going to keep this going throughout the song until we decide it's inappropriate to do so. Something about that didn't look right. Something like that will probably be just about perfect. And these items need to be shortened. Fantastic. And now we have a strings part. It's really just a choir at this point. Okay, next up, I mentioned flute and I mentioned bass. So in this case, I think that the song will benefit more from some type of a melody instrument. In this case, it really feels a bit like a pad, just lasting on and on forever, which can be fine. But in the context of an album where the music is the only thing that I'm presenting, I do like adding a little bit of melodic content. So let's see if any of these tracks will do. None of them look like they are a flute. So I think at this point, we're going to make a new track. It looks like my Mellotron is going into inputs digital 7 and digital 8. So let's set it to the same thing. Make sure that we are record monitoring, which I have off by default. You probably have it on by default if you're using Reaper, and you haven't changed the setting. Just depends on what you prefer. And now we should hear it. Quite a bit louder. It's because I am not using the mix settings that existed in this track, which I'm realizing are not even really accurate because I had all that automation baked in. So anyway, let's find a flute sound on the Mellotron. It's beautiful with that delay on it. I'm going to adjust the reverb. Gives it a little bit of a synth vibe. I think I like that. And I'll give it a shot improvising. It's mostly G minor and F major. So should be pretty easy to come up with some things that sound at least okay. I like the idea, but I don't like the notes. Take 2. The idea of leaving some space here for another instrument. Maybe we'll switch between the flute and something else. I'll bring the flute back in on this next chord though. Well, I liked take 2 a lot more than take 1, and that's the one we're going to work with. So in this case, I'm going to make a little trim here so that my item is locked onto my grid. And you'll notice that I stopped the melodic content a little bit early. If I zoom in on that waveform, you can see that it isn't quite perfectly faded out because I had a really long reverb trail. So I'm going to add a fade to the end of that. So if I decide to reuse that item, which I will, I can reuse it guilt-free. And this one, I think, will happen again maybe once or twice in the song. So maybe we'll let the loop play out once in full, have the flute line come in, do something else, and have the flute line come in again. What did I use in this chimes track on the first song? Oh, cool. Maybe for consistency's sake in the album, I could use that again. Maybe not. That might be overdoing it. Let's try adding a synthesizer. Kind of a funky synth sound. Okay. I will try playing just the root bass notes, and maybe in this blank space, we'll be able to make a more interesting bass line. Let's see what happens. in a bit of a pickle because I liked that, but there were pieces of it that I wasn't too into. So I'm between re-recording it, which would make the video slow down its pacing quite a bit, or just replacing the parts I don't like, which would be probably preferable in this situation. I definitely wanted to go to another chord early over here, so let's just take a look at this part right over here. So I went to that F early. I think what we'll do is we'll punch in at the B section. That should work. Let's double check that cut and make sure it feels natural. That feels good. These synthesizers, since they're not samples, and since I'm adjusting the cutoff of the filter, that's this sound. That's going to be really inconsistent, and I think a loop will be more obvious. So I am going to re-record that for the second time that the synth plays. Bear with me. I'll probably fast forward the video. Okay, that should do it. And now I have a relatively complete song. There's one piece that I want to have that's not in here yet, which is some exciting thing happening during this time when the flute is silent. And I will come back to this chimes sound because I like having some level of consistency from track to track. And this song, I'm not feeling the idea of having percussion on it being as good as it was in the first track. So I think I'm going to skip the drum type percussion sounds in this one. But we are going to put these chimes in. Without the echo. And cool. This will work. We heard the bass cut out there, and it was immediately a tip off that I was recording over the bass track. I didn't disarm this. Something to be careful about. Rookie mistake. We still make those no matter how long we've been doing this crap. Here we go. Let's give it a shot. Need a better part than that. Just something simple to break up the monotony. And in this one, since there's not a lot of reverb at all, we can pretty safely get away with just looping it in a very simple way like that. My tendency is to come in early, just a little bit, so I'm making sure I don't cut that off. I'll go back and fix that on this take. And I also want to make sure that this gets a proper fade out, since the sample otherwise won't end naturally. All right. And there we have it. I think this ends up being our second track, maybe with a few more edits. There were a couple of spots I noticed where, for example, the bass was early or late. But overall, I like it. I think it's going to be a nice, successful attempt at another Dungeon Synth track. Before I get too satisfied with it, I'm going to remember that it just cuts off. So I think I might do a little audio editing trick here at the end. What's this? I think that I might just have that fade out and make a little slice here and stretch this. That feels pretty good. Something like that might work. I'll probably need to make some more adjustments to it or add another sound at the end. But for now, I think that will be it for today's episode. So thank you all so much for watching. Thanks for the support on this second season of How to Start a Dungeon Synth project. And I've had a few more questions about subjects that you'd like to see me cover. So keep the questions coming in. I'm a pretty long way away from finishing. There's probably going to be at least 4 or 5 more episodes of this. So far, the topic that I've been asked to cover in a greater amount of detail that I haven't touched on at all is laying out a J card for a cassette in sort of a DIY style. So I think that I'm going to have to release this one on cassette so I can cover that topic. But if there are any other questions about audio editing, hardware routing, general recording questions as they relate to the genre, don't hesitate to ask. I appreciate the questions because it makes the content easier to produce, less for me to think about. So until next time, this has been How to Start a Dungeon Synth project. Thanks for watching.